All right, welcome to episode number 52 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We're recording on January 26th, 2020. My name is Eric. I'm the host of the show, based in Southern Ontario. I'm a hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, VE3 EPN, and computer geek. I got into preparedness when I was working frontline emergency services and witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events such as ice storms, power outages, etc. I started a small preparedness company to help people get prepared and be able to help themselves and look after each other for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
My name's Alan. My friends and family call me a safety nerd. My background as a first responder has focused me towards safety above all else. I teach first aid, coach my family and friends to be better prepared. I'm a locksmith by trade and have worked in this physical security industry for more than 20 years now.
And hello, I'm from Canada's East Coast. My name is Hughes and I reside in Nova Scotia. I'm a Canadian Armed Forces veteran, volunteer firefighter and station chief, and also a volunteer search and rescue technician and prepper. I've been preaching and living the prepper lifestyle to a varying degree for the last 6 years or so, and this was born out of necessity to ensure the short-term survival of my family, which includes 3 young children.
Hey, my name is Tyler. I'm broadcasting from my 5-acre homestead here in northwestern Wisconsin, USA. Since purchasing my first house, I've been working to turn my property into a self-sufficient homestead with an emphasis on preparedness.
Right. If you want to help support the show and keep the Canadian Prepper Podcast on the air, you can buy a Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt at prepperpodcast.ca. All the proceeds help keep the lights on and the backup generator fueled.
And if you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Canadian Prepper Podcast. Submit a review on iTunes. It helps us get our message out. We also want your feedback, good or bad. If there's a topic you want us to cover, send us an email, feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
And thanks to some of that feedback, I think we've made some changes to the audio. So hopefully this episode here will be a little bit better received. So thanks for all the feedback we got from the last couple of episodes. Hopefully you can hear us this time. And we've got some radiating content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some preparedness-related news articles. Next, we'll be letting you know how we've improved our preparedness since our last episode. Then we're going to get into the main topic for this episode, nuclear accident preparedness. Let's move into some news articles.
One here from the National Post. In case you were living in the dark, Newfoundland got a bit of a dumping of snow over the last couple of weeks. They got 37,000 feet and then another 15 feet on top of that a couple of days later, which of course made it rather challenging to get supplies in. And so what they've seen and what has been reported is that a lot of bartering has happened. According to this article, a lot of butter is the hot commodity and is going for a whole lot of alcohol. So if you are in Newfoundland, stock up on butter for the next big one.
Yep. So Ian, everybody's noticed, is not with us this evening. He's got some bills to pay, so he's working. But he's got a couple of articles in here. One, again, if you've been living under a rock, you haven't heard about this, but the rest of the prepper community certainly has. Lockdown mode in China. So that's starting to happen. They're starting to lock down areas with the coronavirus and panic building of a hospital in 6 days.
Which I just can't see it going well. I really can't.
No, 6th day it's built, day 10 it falls over.
I just don't understand. I mean, it took a month to set up tents in Kandahar. How are they building a 1,000-bed hospital in a week?
Very fast.
Anyways,
but it is what it is.
It's their problem, not ours.
I just hope it doesn't fall over. Hopefully it does what they want it to do.
Yep.
Right.
And he's got another one here. It says the government says don't panic. So likely, kidding, sort of 3% lethally, the same as Spanish flu, but travel is way more rapid, unlike 1919. So it's from the Business Insider.
So I mean, we also have. I'm still taking this with a grain of salt because they're saying 3% lethality, which is cool, but we also didn't have the same sanitization options or understanding of the morphology of viruses and stuff that we did in 1919. So I'm guessing that this is actually going to be a whole lot less than what they're predicting. But of course, if they don't have something to call doom and gloom about, then they don't have something that they can take control over. So
And then they're not selling ads.
exactly.
Right. But
Yeah.
I think with this is that there's no vaccine, there's no known cure either, right? So it's basically just supportive and like supporting the respiratory therapy of the patients.
Well,
basically,
there's also
right?
no known vaccine or cure for the common cold, and it
Hmm.
doesn't have that kind of lethality because
True.
we have the immunity built up to it. So that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's going to be as bad as they're predicting, but boy, it sure does sell newspapers, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Yeah. Yeah, as we're recording here on Sunday night, the U.S., we've only got 5 confirmed cases here. 2 in California, 1 in Arizona, 1 in Washington State, and 1 in Chicago. And all of those are people who have traveled to or from Wuhan within the last week or two. So
That's
Makes sense.
Same thing with Canada. There's only, as of the time of recording of this show, there's only 1 confirmed case in Toronto from a male in his 50s that traveled from Wuhan back to Toronto. So
mhm.
the 2 things that struck out to me though is one is I heard that the mortality rate could be as high as 15%, which seems to be exaggerated. But we'll see as the numbers kind of come out. I don't really trust the numbers coming out of mainland China, so I'll look to see
Yeah.
other countries as they're reporting. I seem to trust
Yeah.
the U.S. and Canada more. And just finally, the RO, or the ability to infect others, apparently it's as high as 3.6 to 4, which means for every infected person, you can expect 3.5 to 4 people to be infected, compared with the common flu, which is like 1.2, or SARS, which is like 1.4. So rest to see how well this virus can affect others compared to other epidemics we've seen.
I'd also be curious to see if they could weigh that mortality rate in Wahoo, whatever it's called. Wahoo. If they could weigh that against air quality and respiratory system health, because I'd be willing to bet that there are other mitigating factors, and if they're already immunocompromised, then of course their mortality rate is going to be higher.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we don't know who the fatalities are so far. Like, are they people that are sick? Are they people that are like elderly? Or is this basically, healthy 30 to 40-year-old men and women? We just don't know yet, right? So we'll have to wait for that stuff to come out, I guess.
Time will tell.
Another thing with it too is the incubation period. I was seeing 10 to 14 days. You can be contagious but not show any symptoms. So
yeah, so
Yeah,
I mean,
that's not good.
the fact that you can also apparently, again, speculation, but you can also infect others without having shown any symptoms yet means that quarantine is virtually useless, because you'll have people
Right.
infecting others before
Yeah.
they show the first symptoms and before they can be tested and put into quarantine, right? So
Which, I mean, is normal. I mean, usually we're infectious for 3 to 4 days before we start showing symptoms with the common cold, which is also a coronavirus. So it's not shocking that that's the case, but it just means that we need to not touch people for a while, and frankly, I'm okay with that.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, just practice your basic flu and cold prevention. Avoid travel. Wash your hands regularly. Practice good hygiene. Cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Go out in public with purpose. So get your shopping done. Get out of the store. Don't wander around.
Order everything from Amazon and then let it sit for a week in a safe area before you open it.
There you go.
Don't order your N95s from China, right?
Is there anything that doesn't come from China, though?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It's going to be tricky to find things that don't come from there, but yeah, I think the message we're trying to get across right now is just status quo, up your level a little bit of preparedness, bump up from whatever DEFCON level you're at to maybe the next one up, and just start preparing, but don't be rushing out and clearing the shelves of anything and everything you can think of as of yet. So
Stay tuned.
No,
on
but
the
I think
news, too.
it's good to just stock up on some more staples, like pantry staples. Also for
absolutely.
medicine, like anything that can reduce fever, whether in adults or kids. We know that fever is one of the main symptoms of this. So just stock up on that stuff. Just make sure that you've got enough for a few weeks, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tyler, did you get a few news articles to cover off?
Yeah. But, news article from the U.S. News and World Report. The headline reads, "Scientists inch doomsday clock closer to midnight, citing both nuclear and climate threats." So just to go in a little bit about this, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists decide when and where to move this clock. Midnight symbolizes the end of the world, and they now set the doomsday clock to 100 seconds till midnight. And this was just on, I believe it was Thursday.
I believe that's it, yeah.
Yeah, so the clock is meant to, quote unquote, warn the public about how close we are to destroying our world with dangerous technologies of our own making. And the last time the world was considered this close to metaphorical destruction was during the US and Soviet Union nuclear arms race in 1953.
It's interesting.
So
Wow.
higher ups are definitely taking note that that's been an exciting start to the year, I guess, to put it nicely.
It is what it is.
Yep.
So I've got in my my notes here as well the doomsday clock being pushed ahead because we can't have a prepper podcast and not talk about that.
Right.
And we've got one news article was emailed in by listener Hank in regards to vodka being traded for butter. Again, that's the St. John snowstorms there and just the bartering that was happening and going on. Opened up a couple of good discussions in some of the little Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups and little chat groups that I'm in regards to, yeah, that's cute and fuzzy right now, but just remember down the road that as things deplete, it'll go from bartering to taking. But it's good to see that that bartering is still around and it was happening there. So that was good. And he mentions here as well, he goes, I'm about 2 hours outside of Toronto, but if Toronto got 3 feet of snow in one day, they'd be in shit town for a while. So yeah, he's not wrong. And Hughes, you got some news articles?
Yeah, so for mine, we've already covered it. It was just that the Chinese are building a 1,000 bed hospital in 6 days. We've seen the pictures, we've seen the videos. So again, I have no doubt they can do it. I mean, the home makeover show is building a house in a matter of 7 days with only about 100 people. So we'll see what they can turn around. But again, I question the ability for that building to withstand any.
They're not curing concrete in that time.
No,
just throw it out there.
No. And also, it's not just that; it's actually staffing it. That'll rest to be seen how they can get that level of doctors and nurses and administrative staff to run a hospital that size, especially one where all the other hospitals in the region are apparently overwhelmed by the situation at the moment. So,
all right, we've got a question here in the live chat from Mohammed. It just says, "Hi folks, already ordered some tools for my survival kit from China, and it's on the way. What should I do with it?" Oh, good question.
Let it sit for a few days. So all germs need a host to live. So if there's no host, if there's no living organism, it's going to die off. Theoretically, the transportation from there to here should kill all of that. In the event that it doesn't, spray everything with Lysol, wipe it down, or bleach and water 10-1. 10-1 water to bleach ratio. Spray it down, wipe it off. That's gonna kill off anything else. And then if it smells funny or looks funny, just don't touch it.
Yep, some good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Start with the outside packaging. Decontaminate that first. Do that outside. Do it in a designated dirty area to lay down. And we're going to talk more about this in the next episode.
Yeah.
But decontaminate it outside so you're not bringing it into the house, and then step away from it. And the closer you get to your house, the cleaner everything should be, so that finally the inside contents are the cleanest and have the least ability to touch the outside stuff.
Yeah, your main thought's going to be to bring that new package inside and start dealing with it. Nope.
Deal with it outside.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so let's move into what we've done lately for preps.
Tune in next week for the rest of that.
Yeah, we're going to do a whole episode on coronavirus and updates and all kinds of fun stuff about it. So
I guess I'm up first. I guess so. One of the things I've done is I stocked up on N95 masks. I had about 20 or so. So stocked up on that. Nitro gloves as well as some hospital grade sanitizer.
They're not black, are they?
What's that? Sorry.
They're not black, are they?
No.
Okay, good. Don't wear black gloves. Black gloves are stupid.
Yep.
No, blue and purple. I've replaced the HEPA filters and air exchanger. I was overdue to do that, so I may as well do it now. Continuing to make homemade spirits onto my second batch now. I'm storing it at about 95% ABV or about 190 proof as a neutral spirit, so it'll last pretty much forever. And then I'll cut it with distilled water as needed for consumption or as a racing fuel. I bought a new drone, which is a Mavic Mini, which is great for covert aerial surveillance. And because it only weighs 249 grams, it is not subject to Transport Canada drone regulations, which are only for drones that are 250 grams or over. Also purchased the Max Tracks for my truck, which are basically long plastic boards. If you get stuck in mud or snow, you stick these in front of your tire. The truck will use them for a purchase point to get out of that situation, as far as some more rigging gear, so like a 40-foot toe strap, some D-rings, axle straps, and all that kind of stuff. So just kind of continually building my preps. Nothing like over the top, but yeah, that's what I did in the last week or so.
Awesome. For myself, so obviously with the running Rapid Survival, I've had quite the influx of people asking for N95 masks and asking for information about them. So I did a whole bunch of research into them. Fairly basic as far as how they work and how they operate, but I did a bunch of research as far as where I can get them from. And my current supplier, as I went to go purchase, is warning that they're depleting their stock. So they're actually rationing who's getting what when they order, and they're looking at past orders and all kinds of stuff. So I'm trying to figure out where else I can source them from. So ended up just being the source that I get them from now. So whole lot of work for nothing, but oh well. And then I started making up my DEF CON list. So based everything off of our last episode there, and I've slowly started making the checklist a little bit different than what I had before. And then I got out to the range. Haven't been out in a while, so I got out on Saturday for the day and put some rounds down range, and it was a good day.
Always is.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, last week I got a VPN subscription set up with Keep Solid, thanks to Eric's Facebook post on the Canadian Prepper Podcast Facebook page. So for $35, I got a lifetime subscription, and that'll cover up to 5 seats or 5 devices. So I've got the laptop, my cell phone, and the wife's cell phone covered now.
Awesome.
Another thing I did. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just said awesome.
Oh, yeah, that was awesome. Another thing, signed up for USCCA concealed carry insurance here in the States. Started another life insurance policy through AAA, and had some fun this weekend. Went out bunny hunting with some friends for a local gun club competition. Only got 3 rabbits, but we're looking forward to picking those up for the Super Bowl party next weekend.
Nice.
And
Nice.
Finally got my beater backup truck back on the road today after replacing the steering shaft. So
Steering is important.
At least,
Yeah,
it's here,
it
I
is.
think.
Nice.
that was it for me.
So by comparison, I've done absolutely nothing. Everything that I've done for prepping has been in the last. This week has been in the last 36 hours. I got a new first aid bag for the home kit. The old one was about 15 years old, had some tears, and had lived a good life. And so I got a new bag, got one at a pretty good deal at a trade show on Saturday, and so we kind of transferred everything over there, which was kind of fun. And maybe we'll do an unpack of that on a future episode and kind of talk about what we keep at home for emergencies. Did some car maintenance, rotated some food supplies, added a few more days worth of food storage, food to the storage area. But I've been working on a training program that's taken up a fair bit of my time this week. So that's been my week.
Nice. All right, let's move into the main topic. So I guess right off the top, we need a quick explanation. So after a nuclear blast occurs, the concern is over the fallout. Obviously, the blast is something you got to worry about as well, but the fallout is what's going to be the big issue. So it's a complex mixture of fission products, or also known as radioisotopes, created by splitting atoms. The decay is rapid, and they emit a gamma radiation. It's an invisible yet highly energetic form of light. So exposure to that radiation will damage the body's cells and its ability to fix itself. And the only thing that's really going to protect you is a dense, thick material. So like many, many feet of dirt, or like inches of lead. That's what's going to reliably stop the gamma radiation. So that's a quick explanation as to what you're up against when it comes to a nuclear type of event. So with that, we'll just open the discussion in the panel.
The other thing to remember is that anytime there's a nuclear detonation, there's also an EMP or an electromagnetic pulse associated with it. And so we did an entire episode on that back a little while ago, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
What happens when an EMP goes off? So go back and listen to that, because that's the other threat. But yeah, there's a lot that happens, and the biggest challenge is what is at risk. So depending on where those particles land, right? So that where that fallout lands, that's going to kind of just tell you where the risk is. And so the higher up in the atmosphere a detonation occurs, the greater the range, but the lower the density. So that there are a lot of variables.
Yeah.
So just on that, if there's a release of nuclear material, like I'll use Fukushima as an example, or Chernobyl, just for anyone listening, there's no EMP that happens with that release of material, right? We're talking about like a nuclear explosion is when the EMP occurs, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're going to have two kind of main things to think about in a survival scenario like this. The immediate aftermath of the blast. So you got the nuclear fallout. That's going to be the most deadly following the blast. But then you've got that period of disarray as well, where there's that widespread crisis that's bound to ensue, where everybody starts to realize, we weren't ready for this, and now what do we do? And they start running out and trying to find all the things that they think they're going to need to survive for the next little while. So your best bet is going to be sheltering in place, unless you've got that nuclear blast compound set up, or you've dug one out in your backyard somewhere, which I suspect most of our listeners have done. Right? Everybody's got a fallout shelter at home. Yes.
Yeah.
I would say yes if I did, but
yeah. Yes, no, maybe. I'm not going to say.
Improvised.
But for those of you that are lacking the shelter, your best guess is going to be the basement. That's going to be as good as it's going to get for taking cover. Assuming you've got a basement, at least you're underground somewhat. But just keep that in mind as well.
I'm happy that I bought a house built on a slab now. That's great.
Yeah, but
get the shovels out.
How far are you from any realistic?
So I looked that up. So the closest, well, first of all, I don't think anyone would nuke Canada's East Coast. There's not much here to do. But if you look at the closest nuclear generating station is Point Lepreau, New Brunswick, which is about 245 kilometers as a crow flies. I don't know what that is miles, probably about 180 miles, I guess, 170 miles. So was one of my questions to the panel is 245 kilometers, about 180 miles. Is that a safe distance for like a release of radioactive material like you've had at like Fukushima, right?
In terms of direct exposure, yes. The challenge comes again from the fallout being carried by waterways, for example. So if you're downstream, that can be more of a challenge than the direct exposure.
Got it. And I mean, understanding, so Point Lepreau is in something called the Bay of Fundy, which is part of the Atlantic Ocean. So directly affected by the waterway, no. So I should be relatively safe in that sense.
Theoretically, again, unless there's a significant explosion that happens along with that release, you should be fine, right? That stuff travels, like the actual release of material of gamma radiation only actually travels something like 20 feet on its own.
Okay.
It's when it's being propelled by shockwave. That's when it becomes a challenge, and that's where you get all those variables, right? Depending on where that release happens and which way the wind is blowing and all that stuff at the time.
I did when I researched that before the show, I did feel a lot better. Well, I wouldn't say a lot better, but the fact that Pickering is only about 20 miles from downtown Toronto, so the fact that I'm
a lot closer than people realize.
12 times that distance is a little bit more comforting, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean those plants are built where they're built for a reason, right? So 20 miles from downtown Toronto is still theoretically a safe distance, right? When we had that fake emergency release, was that 2 weekends ago or last weekend, whatever that was?
Yeah, yeah.
They were cautioning people within 10 kilometers, which is what 16 miles.
No,
goes the other way.
About 7 miles.
Yeah.
I think.
Anyways, which is really not that far, right? In a normal
Yeah.
release, 10 kilometers is the potential hot zone, right? And that's
Right.
that's really not that far. You know, where
Yeah.
I am, I'm 250, almost 300 kilometers from Bruce Nuclear, and now I happen to be downstream, which is a little bit more concerning. But in terms of direct exposure, I'm in pretty good shape.
Right.
Yeah, and just to build on that a little bit, through my research, I was kind of referencing Nuclear Energy Institute and the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and both of those corporations or institutions, they kind of have a 10-mile emergency evacuation zone, and then another 50-mile zone within which food products and livestock, water, all that stuff's going to be monitored. So,
Yep.
so I would say if you're within 10 miles, that's definitely within range to be thinking about this for sure.
Going the other way, 10 miles is 16 kilometers. I'm sure of that. Not sure going the other way, but it's 16 kilometers. So yeah, there's a lot of potential. So the closer you are, of course, the more dangerous it is. Being prepared for direct exposure comes down to time, distance, and shielding. All of radiation is time, distance, and shielding. So several feet of earth, as we discussed, a few inches of lead, which is the big one, and then the distance, of course, we've just covered that. You know, if you're not within 50 miles, you're probably okay. But the other thing to be aware of is that there are a whole bunch of different kinds of radiation that already exist in the world, and not all of it is all that dangerous. So we're talking about gamma radiation, which is, you know, the really bad stuff. Ionizing radiation there are 4 different types. That's kind of the dangerous stuff, is ionizing radiation. The non-ionizing radiation is the stuff that's on the visible light spectrum, and that's not such a big deal. But alpha and beta radiation are what we're regularly exposed to. You know, things like X-ray machines and normal atmospheric conditions. That stuff is not such a big deal. Alpha radiation, for example, is stopped by the layer of dead skin on your body, right? A layer of dead skin or a sheet of paper will completely block that stuff. So the only challenge is ingestion and inhalation. So understanding what's being released is a big part of understanding how to stay safe.
Absolutely, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then neutron radiation, which is like the really bad stuff, is just light a smoke and enjoy your last few minutes. But Tyler, what do you've got? You've got a lot of notes in here, so take it away.
Yeah, okay. So some of this that I'll say is going to be U.S. specific, but the underlying tones are kind of all the same. So just to throw out a few stats, across the United States, there are 96 nuclear reactors. And nearly 3 million Americans live within 10 miles of one of these operating nuclear power plants. And another thing, too, is so if you do live within that 10 miles, you're actually going to receive emergency information materials annually. So that's going to be evacuation protocol, those kinds of things. But I guess just going through kind of my thought process on this, first thing to do is just determine your distance from the nuclear plant. We've kind of talked about that. I've got a link here in the show notes from NEI, and that's an interactive U.S. map, and that'll show, just for the guys in the States, you know, whether there are plants in your state or not. Otherwise, just Google Maps, search nuclear generating plant near me, and it should pop right up. So based on your proximity, and another thing I would take into account is possibly the prevailing wind, and then, you know, given the day or time of the situation, current weather conditions, because that's going to obviously make a huge impact on where that radiation travels. We talked about the 10-mile kind of evacuation zone, and then 50 miles, you're still kind of on, you're not out of the clear within 50 miles, but if you're farther than 10 miles away, your best bet is to bug in, stay home, hunker down. So I guess that would be my plan, because I've got 2 plants actually somewhat near me. One is 70 miles straight south, and I've got another one 90 miles straight east. So, given a typical meltdown scenario at either one of these facilities, I'm staying home. I've got a 2-story house with a walkout basement, so that's going to be surrounded on earth by all 3 sides. And then, just kind of going through, if it were to happen, first thing I'm going to do is move all my supplies down to the basement. I'm going to use plastic sheeting and duct tape or Gorilla Tape to seal off that final exposed wall. And I guess hang tight, use communications to stay up to date, and obviously have all the other basic stuff in order: food, water, meds, that kind of stuff. The only problem that I've been having, and maybe you guys can help out, is getting fresh air into that space. And during summer, if it's warm, I guess my thought was to open the door on the wood-burning stove and then seal off like a furnace filter around that. But is a furnace filter, is that enough to filter out those particulates? Or
Well, it's not like the thing about radiation, like the fallout, is it's not airborne.
okay,
It doesn't just exist in the atmosphere. Like it lands on a surface and stays there. So your first 24 to 36 hours are the big deal. After that, it's as long as you're not wandering around kicking up dust outside, then it really shouldn't be that big a deal as long as you're not directly exposed to it.
right. And I think the biggest thing is if you are exposed to contamination is to get those clothes off of you immediately and wash yourself down. That's going to do a lot in terms of protecting yourself.
Absolutely. The radiation suits are essentially thick tarps that are properly sewn and sealed. So the more stuff you can put between you and it, the better. One of the things to look for, by the way, kind of as an aside, one of the things to look for when you're assessing whether something has been exposed to radiation or not, if it's warmer than you expect it to be without an apparent heat source, there's a good chance it's radioactive.
Okay.
So if
Good to know.
when you're assessing whether something has been exposed or not, if it's warmer than it should be, then that's a good sign.
Yeah. Did anybody cover the potassium iodide pills?
No, I was just going to say, if we want to talk the KI pills for a second, so that's the number one thing that the prepper community usually runs to.
He jumped off on us tonight.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's usually the number one thing when you mention nuclear that anybody in the preparedness community jumps to is, oh, yep, I got my my KI pills. I'm ready to go. Are they going to help you? Yeah, down the road, they're not like your number one thing that you're okay. All of a sudden there's been whether there's a leak or an explosion or a bomb or whatever the scenario may be. Your first step isn't going to be the pop the KI pills. It's going to be to lock your place down, right? From what I've seen research wise, the KI pills come into play when you're starting to ingest like food, water, and you're having exposure after the fact with that fallout. That's where you want to start with the KI pills. It's not going to be your primary. Okay, something's happened, and just start popping those. It's that'll be secondary in your plans from what I've seen research wise.
Yeah, and all those pills do is they kind of fill up your thyroids. Is that correct? Yeah. And then they're not able to absorb radiation.
Yeah, exactly. They stop your thyroid from absorbing the radiation, so it's not going to get damaged. So, do they have a place? Absolutely, they have a place, and are they important in your plan for a nuclear type of event? Absolutely, but your number one thing, if something does happen, is not going to be to run out of the house and go looking for them. You should either already have them in your stockpile of things for your preps, or wait until that 48, 72 hours goes by, and the fallout is kind of drop to the ground, and then figure out a way to move to find them. But if you've got some in your preps, then yeah, they're good to have, but they're not the magic pill that's going to solve. They're not going to make you invincible, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right. Now, is there any harm to taking those if you're not exposed to radiation? Let's say you thought you were, but you actually weren't. Is there going to be any ill effects from taking them?
I'll cover that off first with we're not providing medical advice.
Right.
This is not medical advice. I am not a doctor. What I do know is that if your thyroid isn't working properly, then it's not a good scene for you. It makes life a whole lot harder. So something that stops your thyroid from working properly would theoretically make your life more difficult. So I wouldn't recommend doing that just for kicks. You're trading something bad for something worse. So your best bet is to have a have a properly functioning thyroid, and if you need to temporarily block that function in order to save your life, then that's where those KI pills come into play.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't be taking the pills unless I had a reason to. I wouldn't want to test them out, I guess. It's one of those don't take them for a test drive first things.
So that's a good point. I mean, aside from the pills, I was thinking, what if somebody looked to acquire like a Geiger counter, and two things: one, understanding how to use it, understanding how to measure, and how the absorption works, right? Because typically it measures by absorption over time, I think, and there's limits set out to what you can absorb. But the second one would be, don't just buy the thing, put it in your stockpile of preps, and then like away you go. I think most important would be to understand what the average or normal background radiation is for your area, so that you have a base level reading, and then if there is a nuclear emergency, the next time you go out, you could say, okay, so this is a little bit higher than it was prior to when I measured like 6 months ago, but it's not that much higher, right? Versus if you go out and you don't know what the normal is, you're not going to have a reading from which you can base your what you're seeing, I guess, right? So
you almost go back to all our previous episodes where we say, use your gear, know how to use it, practice using it, and get a feel for it. Same thing. Knowing your environment, knowing what's normal is really important in any kind of scenario that you're planning for, but a scenario like this especially, knowing what normal and what your baseline is, so if something does happen, you can pick out, this isn't the way it should be. Kind of gives you an idea that
and one thing I'd seen is that somebody had bought a Geiger counter. What they were doing is, like, once every month they were going outside of their house and going to 6 predetermined points on their property and measuring the level of radiation at each one of those sites, so that they could not only get a baseline for different parts of their property, but also getting something over time that says, this is the baseline over the last 18 months. So if there is a nuclear emergency, they could say, this is just slightly elevated, or there's been no change. So probably
I like it.
Good idea. Yeah.
Because the other thing to be aware of with a Geiger counter is it only measures radiation when it's in contact with the radiation. So if you think there's a bit of radiological release and that there's stuff on the ground that you need to know about, you need to be thoroughly prepared for that before you go out there, because if you go out and discover that radiation levels are significantly higher, then you've already been exposed to it.
That's what the FNGs are for. You send them out, the Canada fodder.
Send them out, just stay out there for a while.
Got a very important task for you.
Yes. So Transport Canada Guru's got a good point here in the live chat. There is a website that you can go to that'll show you all kinds of different effects from nuclear blasts, and it'll show you, if a bomb were to drop here, where the fallout would be, and all kinds of different little things. So fun little site to play around with. I don't know the 100% accuracy to it, but it could be fun to goof around with. What else do we got? Show notes.
Should we talk about just maybe some basic supplies to have on hand that are going to come in handy, or
lots of water. Don't rely.
All the basics: food, water, beds.
Really, like your preparedness for this is going to be no different than anything else that you're really planning for, aside from a few little things for sealing off windows and such. As far as I'm concerned, anyways.
Absolutely, and a lot of those supplies are going to come in handy too for virus, plague, pandemic, that kind of thing. So it might be a worthwhile investment to have these on the shelf, because they do serve multiple purposes. I guess first thing is plastic sheet rolls. Like I said, seal areas off.
Something I remember reading about years ago: if you're going to bother with plastic sheeting, then take the next step and actually pre-cut that plastic to the right size, and then label it so that you can deploy that sheeting to the right windows at the right time, and have multiple rolls of tape so that you can have 2 or 3 people taping off at the same time, and just pre-cutting it, 6 inches bigger, and then even practice making, use painter's tape if you're just doing it for kicks, because you don't want to wreck your house, but practice putting it up so that you can do that in an emergency without tearing the tape, without tearing the plastic and things like that, and then Once you've got everything taped up, go around and do a second layer, because 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So do a second layer all the way around, overlap it so that you can ensure that you haven't missed anything. But also look for, make sure that you're sealing everything, right? If you have a fireplace, right, you would need to seal that off, but you also need to have a positive pressure ventilation out for your heating system. So there are lots of considerations there, but secure as much as you can.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a good point to have everything pre-cut and labeled, and because you get the time and you can slow down and you're not in a rush. Everything labeled. If you bugger something up and doesn't fit right, you can recut it, and time is not of the essence at that point. The last thing you want to be doing when fallout happens or an explosion or a leak or whatever the scenario may be is panically cutting things out to fit in certain places. That's not going to go well. So
and then take it one step further and actually stack them in the order of deployment. So the first window that you're going to come to from wherever you're storing it, the first window that sheet is on top, and then you can leave it there, move on to the next one, deploy them all, and then you can go back and tape them as you go, whichever. But don't have to look for it, and don't have to try and figure anything out when you're panicking.
I like it.
Yeah. Some other stuff, maybe spare furnace filters and water filters. Pretty good thing to have on hand.
Yep.
And finally, it's going to be kind of the same: plastic sheeting, duct tape, but supplies to set up kind of a wash station or decontamination station. Like we said, if you are exposed to contamination, the best thing to do is get those clothes off of you and do a complete body wash down. So kind of a quarantined area where you can rinse yourself off and do that.
And tune in next week when we discuss how to do that for pandemics.
I'm wondering though, something I know we've talked about it on the show a few times, like the life straw. Would something like that be effective in removing radioactive contaminants from a water source?
Probably
Understanding to what micron that they filter?
I wouldn't think so.
I doubt
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
It's just I think these are really good questions to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, I replaced the HEPA filter in my house here, and I was reading while you guys were talking that they do say that it can filter out, like it can mechanically filter out certain types of radioactive particles down to 0.3 microns, but it's not the most effective way to do it. So is it bad to have? No. Is it going to be effective? Probably not 100%, obviously, right? So my second question was, how would you filter water if, like to your point, Alan, if you're downstream from a nuclear event, right? Are you going to use like a Berkeley filter? Or are you going to use like a live straw or what?
Well, the reality is you probably can't, and I don't know the answer to that question. But the most realistic answer is that you're going to have to wait for that contaminated water to pass through its natural life, and then take it from the cleanest source upstream afterwards.
Right. I was reading too that like I've got a well that's 240 feet deep, so that well, from what I'm reading, should be sufficient to filter out anything.
I think so.
It should be, because you've got everything that I've read has said that you're like 10 feet of earth should be enough. Now that said, the Diefen bunker is 160 feet underground. So who knows? I mean, CFB North Bay is down in the middle of a mountain, so that's for you, Tyler. The Diefen bunker and CFB North Bay. CFB is Canadian Forces Base, and North Bay is where they take the members of Parliament in the event of a nuclear strike. It's close enough to the capital that they can put people there. It's a pretty cool place. You basically drive into the side of a mountain and down and down and down and down, and then you're 5 or 6 layers underground after that.
It's like Cheyenne Mountain, basically.
Yeah, it's like Cheyenne Mountain. It's a pretty cool place, but it's deep underground. So
Nice.
there are definitely plans in place for that, but they're not as predominant as they are in the U.S. I know there are still fallout shelters kicking around, and if you look in the right places, you can find them in city centers, but it's nowhere near as big a thing here as it was there. That's the first house that I had, which was built in about 1955. The first house I owned had a fallout shelter, and it had
that's so cool.
concrete walls,
Cool.
a really, really small door, and no other purpose for that room. So
Neat.
I've got a question here in the live chat from Mohammed again, just inquiring about, do we have any ideas for do-it-yourself masks? So I guess if you don't have something already and a fallout occurs, is there anything do-it-yourself wise that we can come up with?
Anything is better than nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Bandana.
In most cases, a bandana would do it. Anything that's charcoal filtered would be better than would kind of be your next step up. But I would say if you live within the fallout zone of a nuclear plant, then don't do it yourself and go find the
if you're within that area.
Agencies in Canada and the US have all that information readily available. It's not a secret. They don't want you to not be prepared for it as much as they don't want you to panic about it. They want you to be prepared for the worst. So go look them up. And I know if you go to Bruce Nuclear's website, they've got what to do in the event of an emergency, and those places will tell you what to do. But you have to definitely be prepared for it, because DIY kind of sucks.
If you're within the range of the plants, or you're within an area where you're kind of concerned about it, then now's the time to kind of start adding that stuff to your list and have something in your preparedness kit just in case.
Yep.
Yeah. But good question too. If you happen to run across, you're in an area that you don't normally frequent and something happens, and maybe you are stuck doing a DIY thing. So it's always good to have that view as what you could do just in case, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
Panel have anything else to add, or you think we've covered everything off?
I think we've covered all the basics, anyways. Mostly be informed and be aware of how you will be alerted to the fact that there is a nuclear emergency, and don't rely on any one source.
Yeah. And just remember, the KI pills are nice, but they are not the solve all, make you invincible type of pill that some people think they are. But definitely something good to have in the kit for if things do happen. But just remember, don't pop them and go out and run around as if the day is normal, because it's not.
Yep.
All right. With that, let's move into the podcast challenge then. So for that, we've got, if you're in the zone, ask for KI pills. That's another thing we should mention. If you are within that certain radius of a nuclear facility, you can request the KI pills, and they will send them to you free of charge. So if you are within that, I believe it's a 10-kilometer radius, or maybe it's a 15-kilometer radius, whatever it is, throw in a request, and they will provide them free. If not, there's multiple places that you can find them as well.
Aaron, who would provide that? Is that like the provincial or state authority, or? I
believe it's provincial that provides it. Yeah.
Got it.
Or maybe it might be a federal thing for cost. I'm not sure exactly where it would fall. But for Ontario, for example, it would be like Bruce Nuclear would know where you can get them from. Because as far as I know, they operate most of the plants, as far as I know.
I don't know if it's still the case, but all the near Bruce Nuclear, there are, I don't know, half a dozen pharmacies within kind of the range, and they all stocked them, and they were free for the taking.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's still the case. There might be a little bit more regulation to it now, but that's how it used to be, anyways.
So there you go. So figure out if you're in the zone. Ask for the KI pills. Plan an escape route away, not downwind from prevailing upper winds, and consider the use of alternate back roads and caches, because if it's real, you're not coming back.
Yep.
Keep that in mind. So with that, if you get a plan put together, you do figure out exactly how to request the KI pills, or you figure out an email address or someone you can call, or how to get them, flip an email into feedback@pepperpodcast.ca, and we'll let everybody else know as well. And we'll move into episode closing and upcoming events.
Yeah, so first thing, we've got the Podcaster Charity Shoot. It's hosted by Slamfire Radio, and that's going to be July 4th, 2020. That's in Balmoral, New Brunswick. And somebody maybe want to help me with the gun club name.
Yeah, Restigouche Gun Club.
Restigouche Gun Club. Yeah. There we go.
It's a very French name.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, my Franglish is terrible.
Mine as well.
Okay, so we've got the annual Preppers Meet coming up. It's the second week of July in Desborough, Ontario. So make sure to check that out. It's always a good time. Usually runs Thursday through the Sunday. I don't know if they're doing that again this year, but either way, even if it is just the Friday to Sunday, it's a good weekend of camping with a whole bunch of like-minded individuals and a whole bunch of instructors teaching all kinds of great courses and great kinds of skills. So it's always a good time to come out to. And once they get the website up, we'll make sure to get the website out so everybody can check it out and start buying their tickets, because it's an event that fills up quickly and you don't want to miss it. So again, that's the second week of July. And we've got Emergency Preparedness Week coming up May 3rd to 9th. So remember that one.
We'll be talking about that, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And then later on in the year, TACCOM Canada 2020, September 11th to 13th this year. Canadian Pro Gun Podcasters Network will be in attendance. All your favorite podcasters and us will be on hand throughout the show. So make sure you stop by the booth, meet your favorite personalities, pick up some swag, or drop by while we do our special live broadcast. We'll be talking to event organizers, guest speakers, and vendors all about their new products and everything they have to offer. You can see details for that at www.taccomcanada.com. That's a lot of C's in there, so don't miss any. Stay tuned for ticket release dates.
Great. And Transport Canada Guru has got the link here for that nuke map, so I'll throw it in the show notes. But anybody listening, it's nuclearsecrecy.com/nuke map. So I'll throw that in the show notes. And we'll move in the shoutouts. Anybody got shoutouts in the panel for this evening? Silence, crickets. No shoutouts. That's all right.
You know, if you want us to shout you out, you got to talk to us. So
it's true.
Who's in there? Who are the people that have commented tonight?
So we've got Mohammed and we've got Transport Canada Guru for comments this evening.
Thanks for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. Really appreciate the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks for making the show interactive, because that makes it fun. It's we could sit here and chat and be talking heads all episode, but having some live interaction makes it so much better.
Yep,
definitely. Kind of helps facilitate some discussion. That's for
absolutely sure. It does. And so we've got an email here from Better Andrew. It just says, "Hey guys, just listened to the Apocalyptic Hooch episode. Late, I know. And just wanted to let you know that I finally made a batch of mead. I got a pre-made kit for Christmas and finally got some time to start brewing. It's a lot easier than you'd believe. Ask me again in a few months when I actually try it." Okay.
Excellent.
Yep. It's my first time trying to do any of this, and I think I might be hooked. I might not be able to wait for it to be finished before I start making a second batch. Definitely recommend people start with it if they don't mind the long wait. Because like wine, it keeps getting better with age, and keep up the great work. And again, that's from Better Andrew.
So Better Andrew, my advice to you is that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If you've got one in the hopper, get another one on the way.
Absolutely. What else do we have? So we've got, as far as iTunes reviews go, we are sitting at 43 5 stars. Got 3 4 stars. 2 3 stars, and we've still got that one little guy, the 1 star. So we'll take it. The reviews are starting to come in, so that's good. And we've got one new written review here from Canadian Pawnbroker. It says, "Great shows. I really wish the audio was better. It was pretty good with just 2 guys, but now with a few more, it's very hard to listen to." Just move my screen here a touch. Always turning the volume up and down depending on who is talking. So we've tried to make, we've had a couple of emails in now in regards to the audio. So we actually met a little bit earlier before this episode and tried to get some audio things sorted out. And hopefully it's a little bit clearer for everybody going forward. So please keep sending the reviews in. If the audio is not great, let us know, and we will certainly try to hop on it. But we think we've got quite a bit of it tweaked out for this episode. So
I think I was the issue last week, so I got a new headset to replace the new headset I got last week. So
I was definitely a contributing factor there, and I apologize. It was not our best showing, but yeah, definitely let us know again if we've done any better, and hopefully the answer is yes, and hopefully we can keep improving. So that's how we get better, is by listening to the folks out there. So you listen to us, we listen to you. It's a good working relationship.
Yeah, it's good. And we're all new to this too, so we're learning all the audio stuff. I don't think any of us on the panel are audio techs at all, so as we go along, we're learning little tips and tricks on how to make things a little bit better, and I'm learning how to do some post editing as we go along. So it's only going to get better from here.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I'll bring episode number 52 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Take a few minutes to submit a review. It helps other people find us. And you can also find us at prepperpodcast.ca. And we're streaming on Facebook now.
We do record these shows on Facebook and YouTube, both at the same time. If you want an early peek at the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast, and click the notifications tab. It gives you alerts when we're going live. You can also find us on the Facebook page, Canadian Prepper Podcast. To contact me directly, find me on Instagram at PPSWO.
And I can be reached at hfxprepper@gmail.com. And I also have my own YouTube channel. Just search for HFX Prepper on YouTube.
And if you got any questions or advice for me, email into the show at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
My advice to you, Tyler, is to get your own email address.
I'm working on it. It'll be soon. I got to think of a name. I'm getting there.
I can give you Tyler at prepperpodcast.ca.
I'll have
If
something
Tyler
for next
gets one,
time.
I get one.
Yeah, sure. Everybody can have one. They get unlimited email addresses. So please check out Rapid Survival. That's rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there on the live chat while you're buying some prepper gear. Just make sure you research the N95 masks that you need if you choose to purchase them. Thanks for joining us, and you can tune in next episode. We're going to be talking about the pandemic realities.
Bum, bum, bum.
So yeah, it's going to be a good one. So until next time, be prepared, stay safe.
And keep learning.